So right mid-sip. Hey everyone. Happy Friday. It's gonna be a fun show. Nicole might have just been taking a swig of something fun right there. I don't actually know.
Water, ice water.
Yes, I got ice water here too. Oh, that's what I forgot to do. I knew there was one thing. You hear the air conditioning in my background, don't you?
I hear my air conditioning. I don't know that I hear
I
yours.
need to turn mine off. Hold on just a second.
Okay. Do you hear mine, by the way?
I do not. But
Okay,
also, maybe I was hearing mine too loudly.
okay,
I don't hear yours at all now. No, it
okay.
just I did actually record because this office got super hot, like 85 plus degrees, just because it'd be a summer day, and then the two lights on in this small office and my body heat, just like all made it really hot. And so then
Hmm.
I got an in-window AC unit, and then I recorded, and I could hear little zzz in the background. I didn't like that. So now what I do is like a couple hours before the show, I get this thing into an ice box, and then I just turn it off. And so by the time I start to heat up, the show's over. So
Nice. Well, that won't be a problem for much longer, right? I mean, where you're at, it'll be cold before too long.
yeah, I mean, you could have a few surprise days, but let's just say there's another month.
So you told me recently, I think it was yesterday, you told me that the cold is a bit of a misnomer and that it
Mm-hmm.
actually is not as cold there as people think it
Yeah.
is. Let's talk about that. I know that this is totally off topic, but I'm just
Yeah.
curious. What's like a cold winter day? And I don't know if people know where you live or not, so I don't want to say it,
No,
but
I live in the free state of New Hampshire, and
okay. All
I'm
right.
not going to
What
get
is
more
like
specific than that, but that's
all right.
enough to let people know.
Okay. So, what is
Mm-hmm.
a cold winter day in the free state of New Hampshire in Fahrenheit, please? I'm American.
Yes, in American, in freedom units. Okay, that's the
Mm-hmm.
F is for freedom, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so there is winter, and it does get kind of cold, but it's not brutal. So a
Mm-hmm.
typical winter day, like the middle of winter, will be a high somewhere in the mid 30s and a low at low 20s kind of thing. So it's above freezing during the day, cold,
Mm-hmm.
right? But then
Mm-hmm.
it maybe gets below, like most nights it gets below, though not every night. So that's pretty reasonable because literally I wear exactly what I'm wearing now during the winter, except I throw a
Mm-hmm.
coat on and maybe different boots
Okay.
to not slip. So
That's not that's not too much
that's
different than
very
it is
reasonable.
here, really.
Now, that what makes things it different from most, I guess, temperate climate places around here is it does get a lot of snow. So not always all the time, but you get a few feet here and there, and like, it's worthwhile to put snow tires on your car. My
Mm-hmm.
car is a little rear wheel drive, like sports car thing, does not have snow tires, and I have not. It's gone through a few winters without it, and it's fine as long as I'm careful on the days where
Okay.
it's snowy, and I'm just like sometimes I just take the other car that does have all wheel drive and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it's fine. I'm not gonna say it's not cold, but it's decent.
Okay.
Now
Okay.
sometimes you get variability. Like sometimes you get a random day in December, January, or February where it'll get like a high of like 55 or something and everything melts. It'll be like, well, where'd that come from? And then about once every 2 years, you'll get a negative Fahrenheit day, which
Okay.
is just like, I think this last winter we had one day where just out of the blue, it was like minus 13 or something, which is crazy. And
Mm-hmm.
then we just all gathered and I got some neighbors over. We had like a little party with some stew and all this stuff, and then went out to like throw boiling water into the air and do all that stuff. And then 2 days later, it was like a high of like 30, 28, something like that. So it's winter. I'm not gonna say it's not winter, but it's not
Okay.
like I have never on like in my day to day I've never worn any extra layers under my jeans during the winter. So
Okay.
I mean something
Got it.
most years I don't use my hat or gloves either. It's
Okay.
just fine. But
It's very similar to the weather here then in that
hmm
case.
yeah, I mean if you've been to Boston, it's Boston, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you've been to New
Mm-hmm.
York, it's like New York but more volume of snow, I guess.
I feel like
Um,
New York gets really cold in the winter. Like I have been like, yeah, unhappy with the temperature there.
yeah, it's also probably because you have to walk a lot, whereas
Yeah, it's true.
here you can get a remote starter in your car and just like start it up, get it heating up in the driveway, and then just do whatever. It's fine. Now on the other side of things, I'm kind of from the southwestern area of the U.S. / the northern part of Mexico, and
As am I.
yeah, and so I lived in Phoenix for a few years,
Me
and
too.
and that is brutal to me. That
Yeah.
I got used to I never got fully used to it. I got used to it enough to where, I made it through the days, but just now coming back, every time I go back, I'm just like, this is horrendous. Why did I ever live here?
I refuse to go there, honestly. Like, I have family there, so like maybe in the winter or fall or something I would consider, but in the spring or summer, I mean, I lived in Phoenix for like 15 years and I have like, yeah, no, I don't want to go there ever.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only reason you'd want to go there is if you're kind of like a retiree who's just always cold, or
Right.
you're the opposite. You're like very young and in very good shape and want to have as few clothes on as possible and pool party all day, all year long, and get completely drunk in public. It's great for that. So,
Okay.
if you want to do that, I'm saying those are the two categories. For everyone else in the middle, like, I'm not skinny as I used to be, and I like to wear clothes, and there you go. It's just not, it's not the best. All right, we probably bored enough people talking about the
Yeah,
weather.
yeah.
Let's hit the actual intro thing and get going on this. All right, ready? 3, 2,
Sounds
1, and go. So, hey everyone, happy Friday officially. Welcome to the 125th episode of the Digital Cash Rundown. As it's a weekly show, I mean, that's 125 weeks. That's a long time. It's coming up on 3 years or something. Not bad. I'm joined by the one and only Nerd Girl 007, or Nicole, as she's more commonly known. Or I don't know, which do you think is more common?
I think that more people don't know that my name is Nicole and that I'm more known as Nerd Girl. Because like if I go to events or things, people are like, "Hey, are you Nerd Girl?" Nobody's ever like, "Hey, are you Nicole?"
Yeah, it is kind of crazy because you think that Nerd Girl is the combination without the vowels and with the 007, it might be unique, but you'd think that Nerd Girl is not completely unique out there as far as a pseudonym,
Yeah, but those are my initials, NG.
Yeah.
So it was like very deliberate part of my branding.
Yeah. I mean, it worked out pretty well. I mean, now the Desert Lynx, on the other hand, has nothing to do with my actual name. So that's a little bit of a different story. But anyway, remember, if you have one of my NFTs, you can leave super chats in the NFT in the Digital Cash Rundown channel on my Discord. And there you go. If not, you have to dump in the regular live chat, and then it's by my discretion if I answer your comments or not. So, if there's some stuff that absolutely needs to be answered, I'll definitely put it in. But otherwise,
and I did ask my friend Rags to Riches to drop in to the live chat. I don't know if he will or if he'll stay for very long, but if you could keep an eye out for if he makes a comment, I would greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh, there he is. Hey. The pyramid logo, that looks a lot like the El Dorado market, which is one of the Maya protocol front ends, but it probably is just a complete coincidence. Anyway, maybe a crown or something. Oh, anyway, before we get too much into this kind of semantics, the market dumped.
Yep.
The only reason I know it dumped, I mean, some people, I saw it mentioned on Twitter, but the only reason it caught my attention at all is I got a text from a family member. It's like, "Oh, are you okay?" And I'm just like, what happened? And I just look, I'm like, another dump. I mean, in my 10 years in crypto, I've seen this a few times. I'm not gonna get spooked. But what happened is, all right, switch to the story. SpaceX Bitcoin write-down sparks confusion. Bitcoiners quiz Elon Musk. Elon Musk revealed that SpaceX holds Bitcoin on its balance sheet in 2021, but the exact amount of the company's holdings remain unknown. So, but more specifically about this thing, basically people thought, or by people, I got to scroll down here, Bitcoin Magazine. God damn it.
Right, a reputable news source by any
Yes.
standard, right? Like
Yes.
100% above board all the time.
Of course. They said, breaking. Elon Musk's SpaceX sold all its $373 million in Bitcoin, according to the Wall Street Journal. That's what they said. Now, Community Notes jumped on and just said there's no evidence to support this. It did not. The Wall Street Journal did not say that they sold this much. There's also no evidence provided proving when a sale occurred and how much was sold. And so basically, they marked down the value of their Bitcoin by 373 million, which means that the amount of Bitcoin they hold is now 373 million less than it was before.
Right.
Does not mean,
essentially they could have sold nothing and Bitcoin's value has just dropped that much.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if they held, let's just say, $1 billion in Bitcoin, that would have been super easy for that to happen. If they, I do know that they, from what I heard, Elon Musk or Tesla or one of those, again, they're not all the same, even though they're connected, right? But sold some Bitcoin at some point because the value of the holdings was too high to qualify for some renewable energy grant or something like that. There were some rumors back in the day. So they probably did sell some at some point. But basically, nothing happened. And thanks, Bitcoin Magazine, you tanked the whole freaking market. Like, people should be really, really annoyed at them. And then the next story, next article, think about Bitcoin Ether price slump leads to crypto bloodbath with $1 billion in liquidations. Wow. So, people getting wrecked.
Yep.
Thanks, Bitcoin Magazine. Is this really do you think this is really just Bitcoin Magazine's FUD that just like piles on? Do you think there's something more? I don't know.
Okay, so having worked in media for a long time, as have you,
Yes.
you know very well that the number one commodity that a magazine or a publication is after is attention. So it's clicks, right? What they need to prove to sell space to their advertisers is that people click on their articles and read them. So the more clicks they get, the longer that people stay on the pages, the more that their ad space is worth. And that's the name of their game. So all that really, really matters to a media outlet is attention, and clickbait headlines bring that attention. Now, that said, like, you don't want to completely lose your credibility in the process, because once people no longer trust anything that you say, it doesn't matter how clickbait the headline is, no one's going to click it. But Bitcoin Magazine has something of an establishment. People are going to read it regardless anyway. Look, people are still reading CNN.
Yeah, that's a good point about the media incentives. And it's one reason why I like alternative monetization models over just the ad model. Because if it's just the ad model, then people will be incentivized to say anything shocking to get attention. They could ruin their credibility. They don't care, because as long as they can consistently drive traffic back there, then it's only if they get really bad to where people see that they've published something and then just will not even click. It's like, so there's this giant credibility kind of spectrum that they can, this is all worthless, this is worth something. This is the only thing they care about. Now, if people subscribe to you and pay you because they value your content, then the entire spectrum matters, which is kind of interesting because Twitter, speaking of Elon Musk, right? X.com, whatever you want to call it, does not actually produce content. Now, and they put advertisers on. Creators on Twitter, X, do not get ad revenue directly. They get it indirectly as one of their monetization options. So definitely the more impressions they do, the better they get paid to a certain extent, but then they also have like subscribers and stuff. And if you have subscribers, then your posts are boosted in the algorithm, things like that. So the incentives are a little better. They're not all the way there though. I think that a pure pay for what you use kind of value, like whether it's pure tipping or pure paid unlocked content type thing, is probably the best way to like get the best things. But
yeah, but tipping is kind of a BS model, because if you write something that's true, but the community who you wrote it about doesn't like it, or then they're not like, it can be true, it can be honest journalism that you spent hours, months, years, weeks compiling and coordinating, and then get paid nothing for.
Yeah, I guess so. Which is the hard part about that, I've noticed, is audience creation and curation. Because if you have a good audience that likes you for what you do, then they'll pay for the quality of the stuff you put out. But if it just, oh yeah, you wrote something good about insert your favorite project, and people come in and throw you lots of tips, and then you say something that kind of pisses them off, then they don't give tips. And unless there's some haters who want to come in and tip you for that, then you just don't make anything. So the economics of that are kind of interesting. But yeah, so as far as the media thing, so they clearly did something because they're just grasping at straws for whatever can pump their numbers. I would say it's pretty obvious that affected the price, but the price got hit hard across the board, basically. Pretty much only THORChain, the rune token, has done pretty well, which is the next subject is a little interesting. But yeah, you think it almost seems like there might be have been a capitulation or something kind of percolating on the horizon, and this was just this just kind of set it off rather than it caused the whole thing. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I can honestly say that I know almost nothing about THORChain, but this is the point in the market cycle where we're either at the low or very nearly approaching the low. So this happened in the last cycle too. The only thing that I could see potentially, if we were drawing correlations between this cycle and last cycle, would be what we're in 2023. Okay. In February of 2020, that's when COVID happened. Everything had been kind of starting to run up, right? In advance of the halving. And then, the COVID scare happened and Bitcoin drops all the way back down to $3,000. That could still be coming, that kind of event. Of course, that's a black swan,
Yeah. It does make sense. The thing is, it just makes it kind of reminds me right when we were talking about the weather and stuff, literally the weather. Homeless Nomad was in the live chat saying, did you pick up more crypto? Which ones? And that just reminds me of, first off, I didn't pick up any more crypto because with what? Fiat, maybe. But also, if I did, I don't think I would tell anyone, because I personally don't like the responsibility of telling people what's going to, or indicating to people what might do well or not do well. Not only personally, but also I am not good at it. I get attracted to projects because, it's this cool thing. I like that. This could change the world. And I get into it, and then the price just is awful. And I mean, I just say, you know what? I'm only going to make money by working and the work that goes into this. And, we'll see if there's profits, but I've decided I'm not a good investor, or because I haven't really tried, to be honest. That hasn't been my focus.
Sure.
But I do think that 2025, at the end of the year, will probably be the bull top of the next market.
That would make sense. That's retail mania time. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I would just say, if people have projects that they think are valuable and will go up, around this time, this whole year, let's be honest, has been a great year to accumulate more. And then the next 2 years, especially the end of the next one, tends to be the year that it goes up, according to what we've observed over every single crypto market cycle in the last, I don't know how long. When was the first market cycle? Because like Bitcoin's been around for
2013.
okay, so decade, the last
Mm-hmm.
decade. And I remember when I first got some Bitcoin in 2013, it was like $130 per coin then. And I got paid in it a little bit, and then it went up to 1100, and then it went down to like 190 something. And then
Mm-hmm.
there you go. The cycles continue. So,
Mm-hmm.
all that stuff. All right. Do you want to touch on the THORChain stuff?
Yeah, we can do that. Honestly, like I don't have very much to add about it. I just don't know much about it. I know there have been like numerous exploits and issues with THORChain, but I don't have much much of value to add on this topipic.
Yeah. Well, I can carry a lot of it because
You carry it then.
I've
You
been
go.
very interested in THORChain for a long time, or
I
a
know.
couple years. So
Yeah.
anyway, THORChain on the verge of releasing something, some very big upgrades, some very big features, got basically got paused. The network got paused because, according to this tweet, right, a responsible disclosure indicates that most threshold signature scheme libraries in production are vulnerable to a threshold signature scheme security issue. Blah blah blah. They should all. Anyway, so basically there was a TSS. Let me just abbreviate to TSS now that I've said what it means. Basically, there was a vulnerability that could affect a whole lot of different cryptocurrencies that use threshold signature schemes that basically aggregated signatures and like a lot of multi-sig type stuff. And basically, if exploited, could result in people like losing a bunch of money from like DeFi protocols and joint custody type things. And basically, well, that's what THORChain does. And so it was paused because of this vulnerability was kind of disclosed. And so to give the brief thing about THORChain, I might be in a little bit of like a a bubble on this kind of stuff, but like I try to look at like big innovators because there's a lot of improvers in this space who like take a thing and do something cool. And like for example, I think that Dash is one of the best improvers in this space because it took Bitcoin's basic model but innovated a few other things on top of it to make it like a nice, smooth, fast payment experience type thing. Bitcoin is obviously a huge innovator. Ethereum was obviously a huge innovator. Maybe I would put Zcash in a similar kind of a part because of the zero knowledge proof privacy innovations over the years through Zcash have been pretty huge on that part. But so then one of the more recent ones I would say is THORChain that did a thing that no one else has done, and basically create a truly cross-chain DEX in a way that could definitely replace centralized exchanges almost entirely, except for, of course, the fiat on-ramp, which there are some front ends that do the fiat on-ramp part. And so I remember starting to use THORChain in the early days of 2021 during the Chaos Net phase, which is a test net, but it was a public test net. They used real assets, but just real assets with capped how much money you could put in there to prevent loss. And it did get hacked a couple times, or did have a few exploits during that time. Since then, it's run pretty it hasn't had any exploits as far as I know. It has paused once in a while. Any one of the nodes can like issue like an emergency pause of the network, and then the nodes kind of vote together to like resume the network, whatever. So it's super cutting edge technology that allows us to do some really interesting stuff, which I could do a whole long thing on just all that stuff, but I don't want to bore everyone. But so this could be something that's this is why like a lot of these things are still kind of have to be worked out to be really they have to be really careful to make sure that nothing crazy gets kind of introduced into this stuff. So that's kind of what happened with this. Now, what makes this interesting, however, more interesting than that, I should say, after two big innovations were released recently. One is called streaming swaps, which basically breaks up swaps into very small pieces so you don't get slippage. So basically, they've gotten swap fees competitive or better than like even like a Coinbase or like a centralized exchange like that, which is huge. And then they released or are about to release a decentralized lending protocol and a zero interest, no liquidation lending protocol, which is very interesting. And right when they're about to do that is when this thing gets disclosed and they go get it. Now, the interesting part here is how that happened. So this fellow, Tyler Reynolds, salute you, dude. He found out about this. He was made aware of this exploit, and then he reached out to the team, and then they paused stuff. But during this time, there was a massive short opened up on the price of Rune, THORChain's native token, during this time. And basically, there's some, and he said, the question for me is, who is behind this massive short? I do not believe for a moment that it was organically promoted by influencers who use technical analysis to rally their followers to short an asset that had risen 60% in the last few days. I believe Binance, Bybit, and other centralized exchanges with large Rune perp activity at negative funding rates should feel obligated to investigate the accounts behind the massive short, as it will likely lead to unraveling a very well-funded hacking network responsible for many other hacks throughout crypto. So basically, according to the person who discovered this exploit, I would say not first, but responsibly discovered it first, that someone else discovered this first and then decided, okay, well, they're about to release a huge feature. We know an exploit. We're going to open up a massive short on the THORChain token, Rune, and then we're going to exploit the network and make a lot of people lose money and then profit, which is pretty shady. But I mean, I guess it's fair. I mean, it's kind of fair game too. So,
in my opinion, it is fair game.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would say that if you discover an exploit in a contract that can make you lots and lots of money, the problem isn't that you make the money. The problem is that the exploit existed. So, I mean, we talk about like the Bitcoin Cash developers who, discovered the inflation bug in Bitcoin Core and reported it, right? But how much different would the world be today if they had it? Like, would it be better? Would it be worse? It's difficult to say. Personally, I don't think that taking advantage of contract vulnerabilities is a, I don't know, bad thing, or is a like a, black hat kind of thing, because otherwise how will people ever learn their lesson?
Yeah, I mean, things do, like, it really depends on how things are done. I think if you have insider knowledge, like, I don't believe in, so, like, insider trading type stuff, right?
Sure.
If someone knows of this exploit, knows of something fatal in the network, I believe they should responsibly disclose it. But if they don't and decide to instead make a big profit off of shorting it and then hoping the network gets exploited, I think that's a little, I mean, it's fair game. What can you say? I think if you exploit the network to steal other people's money, it should be exploited. But if you steal people's money, that is stealing people's money, and that's unethical in that way. To where, like,
I mean, is it stealing people's money, or was people's money in a faulty contract?
I mean, both. If there's if the rules clearly state this is the way it's supposed to be run, and then, in this case, by the way, I don't think it was a faulty contract. I think it was actually just a code exploit that would allow you could exploit it to steal money. It's not a contract where you find an exploit in the contract and then you're playing by the rules, but the rules give you surprisingly give you money. So that's where it gets a little weird. I personally believe break everything responsibly for the improvement of technology. That's my personal ethos in this thing. Is I think you need to stress test everything. You need to find and push exploits everywhere to just harden the system, but do it in a way that minimizes human suffering. But
Yeah.
some people don't want to do that. And so in this case, what I wonder is, I wonder what was planned for what we didn't find. Like the actual finding an exploit and opening up a short is one thing, but plans to exploit it, I don't know. Do you think there
Yeah.
were plans to exploit it and steal from it, or just to then publish, anonymously disclose this bug and crash the whole, the whole thing? I don't know. What do
I
you?
don't know enough to speculate on, what I think happened.
Yeah. So either way, it's kind of an interesting thing to look at, because a lot of these networks like THORChain are doing a bunch of really interesting, innovative things, and a lot of people are, I guess, a lot of people are critical of projects like that because things do go wrong, and I don't think that's cause for criticism. I just think that that's like a innovator beware type thing, not even like a buyer beware thing, but like you're using super cutting edge technology, and there's no way to have it be perfect right away.
Yeah.
Now, if 5-10 years down the road, there's chain pauses every, month or so, a couple months or so, and they're still fine. Like at that point, you might be like, okay, maybe this isn't the right way of approaching the problem, because clearly it's prone to exploits and stuff, or you're not doing a good job. So, yeah, that's a bit crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, after that, so we had a chat. I think it was 2 weeks ago. I had it is right around the time when the
Scott
SEC
Cunningham.
decided to go after Richard Hart as Monk and HEX and Pulse, and as their latest target. And then I had Scott Cunningham on to talk about it, because I know he has had a long history of writing about this kind of stuff. He's kind of a little bit more on the investment side of crypto stuff than me, but he also tends to be pretty kind of unflinching in technical reviews. And I forget which, was it SoMe.social? It's like one of those early social things. He got tons of threats and stuff over talking about that stuff. So
Yeah.
I figured hey, let's jump into it and kind of chat about it. And then I don't know if he's watching right now. Let me actually check the live chat. One of the subscribers, the channel, who goes by XKCD, I think is how he goes here, was not pleased. He was like, "Oh, you just let him say anything. You should have someone like Nicole on to talk about the other side of things." I'm like, sure.
So yeah, so let me
sure.
so I was just watching that Scott Cunningham interview right before you and I jumped on. I didn't finish watching it, but I watched a majority of it. You have it time stamped, so I watched from the time span. So there's one point he had written an article like why I sold all my HEX at some point, and you during that interview with him, you said something like, I read your article and I couldn't find anything technically wrong with it. But you know what's funny is that I used to do a live stream called Building Bridges, where I was talking about establishing relationships with people who were, outside of the, HEX community. And by the way, just in case anybody doesn't know, yes, I hold HEX. Yes, I sacrificed for Pulse Chain and PulseX. I'm by no means any kind of maximalist. I hold all kinds of other coins. I like other things. It doesn't bother me if you don't like the things that I like, because
absolutely.
it's just money, right? But so one thing that I will say is there was one time when I had it scheduled where Scott was going to come on to stream with me, and we were going to go over his paper. And Scott said, okay, well, before the stream, I want to know what your criticisms of my paper are. And so I took, I put it in Google Docs, put the edit function on, and pointed out every flaw in his paper. And Scott then canceled that interview because he knew that he had made several mistakes. Now, I would have to go back and look at that to tell you exactly.
Did you ever have a follow-up message?
No, he said he was gonna go revisit those things, and then he would come back to me to discuss it, but he never did. Now that said, like, I like Scott, I don't have anything against him, but I'm just telling you there are flaws in that paper, technical flaws in that paper that you may not have caught on to.
Yeah.
You know, and that, you know, Scott certainly wasn't aware of. Now, within that interview that you did, he said something about during the first year of HEX, people sent their ETH to Richard Hart, and then Richard sent them back a certain number of HEX. That's also completely false.
Yeah. So why don't we start with just like an overview of kind of the launch part, because it seems like the mechanics of how the HEX contract works seem to be, I wouldn't say, I don't know if well established is the right way of saying it, but it seems to be like that much I understand pretty well. I think what I did not dig deeply into personally was the launch situation and like the whole sacrifice and all that kind of stuff. I kind of like vaguely understand it, but not in a super kind of deep way.
So the sacrifice is a different thing, but if you want to get into like the launch mechanics of HEX, those are two completely separate issues. So HEX launched as like it very similar to how EOS launched with like a 1 year you could enter through the AA lobby. So you could deposit Ethereum. You deposit Ethereum on like on any given day, there's a certain number of HEX that's available, right? People would deposit Ethereum at, you know, before, I don't know, 5 p.m. or 4 p.m. or whatever the time was that day. I can't remember. It's been a while.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, the number of HEX, like what that was available for that day, was distributed relative to proportion that was put in to the contract. It was never sent to a person and then the person decided. It was always determined via smart contract.
So if you deposit, so basically during a 24-hour period, a certain amount is distributed proportional to people's contribution who had contributed during that past 24-hour period. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So it's kind of like just like a everyday distribution mechanism where whoever, so like if I contributed like literally all like half of Ethereum supply, let's just say I was a whale on one day, I would get literally all the HEX that day, but only for that day. I'd have to redo it every day or something.
Not necessarily, because if someone else contributed some, say you contributed 90% of the Ethereum that went into the AA lobby that day, and someone else contributed 1% and 5% and, you know, on, you would get 90% of the, but then everybody else would get the percent that they contributed.
Yeah. So if I contributed like $20 in ETH, but everyone else contributed like pennies, I would still get all that stuff. So it's kind of like a mechanic made to make you, first of all, have constant contributions over the time period, the whole time period. You know, every day, make sure you keep people going in, but also to have people sort of like almost auction style bid it up to see how much they would totally contribute to the whole thing.
Right, and you could like get a lot more HEX than you would have, because at the same time, right, like initially it's not available for sale on Uniswap because this is the only distribution method. But after the first few days, I don't know if it was after 1 day or after 10 days, I can't actually remember the number of days, but after a certain period of time, the token is also available for sale on Uniswap. So if you want to guarantee that you get a certain number of HEX for a certain amount of Ethereum, you can do that, or USDC or Bitcoin or whatever it is. You can do that on Uniswap. However, sometimes you're getting a better deal by participating in the AA lobby.
Yeah, so you put it into the lobby. So you're sending to an address, right? Now, have we figured out who's behind that address?
So the origin address, so Scott and you, when you were talking about it, I noticed, automatically assume that Richard Hart is the owner and controller of the origin address. And a lot of people do believe that, right? And I don't know whether he is or is not, and I'm not going to speculate on it because I don't know, because it's not fair for me to say he is or he's not when I have no evidence to suggest that he is or is not.
It's kind of like the Satoshi's hoard thing. It's like the first miner, everyone, it seems to be one entity, but no one knows exactly who that one entity is.
Exactly, right? And yeah, and for all we know, there's like a multi-sig on that, and there's multiple, you know.
So, and like, let's just say, also like Richard Hart it's a pseudonym anyway. So what one could say is it's just like Satoshi might be a few people, but might be one. Might be Craig Ray. Who knows? But like, let's just say the Hart. Let's just say Hart owns that address. It could be him.
Well, the OA owns that address. Really specifically, the OA, the origin address. Yeah.
Yes. And so what else is the origin address is basically whoever's issuing the hex, I guess, has it, right? So when you put money into that, you give money to that entity, and then you get, or you give ETH, let's say, this specify the kind of money, right? You give ETH to that, and then you get hex out in a semi-proportional basis, the way we already covered how the mechanics work.
Correct. And so, and that's a smart contract that distributes it. It's not a person or an entity. It's a smart contract. There's no human involvement in deciding this goes here.
Yeah, so it's like a vending machine where which, or maybe a slot machine, depends on but whatever, it's a machine that you put money in. Someone owns the box that the money goes into, but it's not like there's not a person behind the machine manually distributing it. It's just the machine kicks the money out.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So that's how the distribution worked. Is that the entire initial distribution? Is that how the whole thing worked?
So there's other mechanisms. I would actually really suggest, if you're like, because we could spend a really long time going into this, but there's actually a really excellent paper written by a developer named Kyle. It's called The Layman's Guide to the HEX smart contract.
Yeah.
And he's a developer, the person who wrote it. I would suggest reading the opening portion of that. So there's also bonuses for referring, right? So let's say that I am like, hey, I love this. I bought a bunch of this, and I think that, it's going to increase in value. And someone's like, hey, where can I get it? And they're like, oh, you can get it. You can get it here. You can get it here. And if you enter this code, then I'll also get some, but mine doesn't come from you. It comes from the origin address.
Yeah. So
it's just a referral code. And you know what? I know people are like, oh, multi-level marketing. But for one thing, it's single layer, right? There's no multi-layer. And for another thing, referral codes are huge in cryptocurrency.
I use them.
Yeah.
So, but to think about referral, so is the referral code part of the contract, or is there, how does that fit? Because this is a very complicated system, and as you said, it's like a machine, right? Like a vending machine kind of thing. I'm trying to figure out is the referral part programmed into the smart contract?
The referral code is programmed into the smart contract, and if no referral code is entered, then nobody gets the bonus.
Okay, so just for purposes, because this is something I've actually been, the anti-Sybil mechanism stuff is actually something I'm very interested in crypto in general. How do they determine, I guess, personhood as far as a referral? As in, can I sign myself up 10 times and keep
Yes, you can. You can use your own referral code. Yes, you can.
Interesting. So literally, someone would be an absolute idiot to not use a referral code, right?
Sure, yeah, and people did absolutely use their own referral code. I believe that the referral, if you use your own code, was assuming that you use the same address, that the bonus was less, but I would have to look back to see because, gosh, like I said, it's been so long. Okay.
Yeah.
Additionally, initial distribution goes like this. If you hold Bitcoin in a self-custodial wallet on the day that HEX is created, you're entitled to free claim a certain portion of HEX relative to your Bitcoin holdings.
Oh yeah,
you claim it on day one, you get the maximum. You claim it on day...
Byteball did a similar mechanism. I remember some people claiming, whatever. And one could say Bitcoin Cash and SV and all that. That's a little dicier of a thing because it wasn't like an airdrop to Bitcoin holders. It was literally just a chain split. But yes.
Right. So if you claim on day one, you get the maximum amount, and that amount goes down each day throughout the 365 days of the AA lobby. Now, at the end of that time period, any unclaimed Bitcoin gets distributed to the people who have staked their HEX relative to the number of T shares or trillion shares that they hold. So if you've got like the maximum length of a stake is 5,555 days. It's like 15.2 years. That means you've got the maximum number of, T shares. You get the biggest payout. If you've got a short stake that ends like right after the big payday, you get less of the distribution.
Yeah, that makes sense. So
now there's one more portion, and this portion has not changed from HEX. So people could stake their HEX or leave it liquid, right? So a lot of people make the mistake of believing that you have to lock up your HEX for a certain duration.
You
and
just get more rewards if you do, right?
Right, and that's just not the case. You could hold your HEX liquid. I believe if you free claimed from Bitcoin, you were forced to stake at least until the end of the big payday. But anything that you purchased was up to you, whether you staked it or held liquid, or you could stake it anywhere from 1 day to 5,555 days. That's completely up to you. So that's a misunderstanding in what people think, how people believe that the smart contract operates.
Yeah.
It's up to you. If you bought it, it's yours. It's yours to do what you want with. Okay, so
it seems like also really quick. So it seems like from the initial distribution, people who had Bitcoin got HEX, who claimed it specifically. And so they didn't have to do anything other than a few things to just claim it. They didn't have to give up any capital for that. Now, in referral things, you could get referral bonuses without putting your own capital at risk, right?
Correct.
And so it's just the actual, the A lobby, I guess, mechanism where you actually put in money in order to get HEX. Put in an exogenous capital, right? You put in external stuff to get HEX.
Yeah, and absolutely you could refer without having put in any of your own money. There were quite a lot of people who did.
Yeah, and so, as far as like the referral thing, the referral does rely on someone else putting money on, but the Bitcoin part does not. That's just kind of a giveaway. So you could say that there was a giveaway, and then there was an investment part, or whatever, a buying in part. And
there was a giveaway, there was a referral, and there was a personal purchase.
Yeah, and so the referral thing could be considered, I guess, compensating people for marketing services, kind of, right?
Yes, but it wasn't a person compensating people for marketing services. It was part. It was within the smart contract, and you weren't like paid to create deliverables or paid to promote. It was simply like, if you want to share it, just like Coinbase having a referral program, right?
Yeah, you get paid by the company to promote the company.
Yeah, but there's no specific ask. It's not an employment contract.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that's how everything was distributed.
Yes. So then there's this remaining component that continues within the HEX smart contract. So people stake, right? And they may stake for, any duration of time. Like I said, you can choose 1 day, you can choose 5,555 days, you can choose any time period in between. Okay. So if you stake and you serve 50% of your stake, like let's say that I make a stake for 2 years, and after 1 year I'm like, you know what, I really want my money back, I don't want to have this stake anymore, then I'm going to get back 100% of my principal, but I'm
Yeah.
going to lose my interest. And then that interest, instead of just like disappearing into thin air, that
Yeah.
interest gets distributed 50% to stakers relative to the number of shares that they hold, and 50% goes to the origin address.
Okay. So, I mean, it seems like the origin address is clearly a creator of some kind who then kind of takes a chunk of everything that goes through it. This is the Hex contract open source. Like, it has to be, right? Because it's on.
So it is like, what's the right word? It's not open source in that it can't be forked, like it's copyright protected, but it is open source in that you can view the contract.
So by copyright protected, that must mean there's a legal entity that has issued that, right? That has claimed the copyright, saying this is our property. If you copy this, we, the legal entity, will sue you, the other person or legal entity, right?
Yes.
So which entity is this that owns Hex, I guess?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that one, but it is protected in that, like, it is not strictly speaking open source. However, the code is viewable.
Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, really quick, but
okay.
But yeah, so it's viewable. So technically, someone could copy paste the code and run a version of Hex that is exactly the same, except does not have an origin address.
And that has actually been tried multiple times. There have been, I can off the top of my head think of 2 entities, and I know that there has been a third, and each time has failed spectacularly.
Yeah, and so just that people tried, and just because they couldn't convince as many people that it was a good idea, they just...
No, I don't think it's because they couldn't convince as many people.
Oh, you mean that it technically failed, is what you're saying?
Yeah, it technically failed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because both times that I can think of, in fact, all 3 times that I can think of, I can only think of 2 of the names. But in all of the instances that I can think of, it was very popular. People loved the idea because one of the biggest criticisms of Hex has always been the origin address.
Interesting. And so basically, there must have been quite the talented developer behind this thing to make it kind of work that well, and then someone copied and pasted and couldn't. I guess you'd need to have another talented development team to kind of do the Hex Classic or whatever you call it.
Well, and I mean, I think that a lot of the consensus, and I'm not a developer, so I can't, I can't speak to this. I think that a lot of the consensus is that the origin address itself is a necessary entity for making the contract work, because the origin address, by the way, has never sold Hex, but it has provided liquidity. It creates the asset that liquidity is bonded to. And since it holds the vast majority of the token's supply, it controls how much or how little liquidity is available on the market for the most part. Of course, other people can add and remove liquidity, but because the origin address holds such a huge percentage of it, it controls the liquidity bond and most of the ratios.
Yeah, you mean the how much liquidity there is in the ETH Hex pair on stuff like Uniswap,
ETH Hex
right?
pair, ETH USDC pair, etc. Yeah, like.
Interesting. And so, so then money has been moved around from the origin address.
The origin address has provided and removed liquidity, yes, and then the origin address also sacrificed. Now we're like jumping ahead, so I want to I want to not jump ahead too far here. The origin address did also sacrifice a lot of the a lot of the funds that it collected for Pulse for the Pulse chain sacrifice. But okay, so let's go back really quick to how and then also the origin address did distribute a lot of the funds that it has held, that it has collected.
And by funds, we're talking about ETH here, right?
Yeah, ETH and
Okay.
HEX, two different wallets. And there's a person in the community who created, he's like a tax accountant, and who created like a full audit of everything every action that the origin address
Yeah.
has ever taken and where all of those funds are now. His name is Gunther. He's a real controversial person in the community now because he's like, I don't know, supported numerous tokens that have fallen completely flat, and is sometimes a bit of an a-hole. I rather like him, but I like villains.
Yeah. And so we're talking about the origin address. So it received ETH for the first during the initial distribution phase, and then afterwards, when you have stakes that get prematurely ended or whatever it is, and half goes to whatever, half goes the origin address, that's HEX now. So
Yes.
the ETH was the first part, and there just hasn't really been more ETH put in there. But then
Correct.
HEX is all the other stuff. So now as
Correct.
far as stuff that's been moved around, so obviously there's like liquidity and other things like that. And distribution, has this just been HEX, or has this been ETH as well? Or has there been both as far as stuff that's been moved around other than just provide liquidity?
Okay, so the origin address has used Ethereum that came in through the AA adoption amplifier to purchase HEX. As far as I know, that's not illegal. You're allowed to buy your own asset.
Yeah. So,
right?
I mean, I guess so. I'm not a lawyer. That's how they have me on
Right?
this
Like,
thing. But
okay,
like,
let's say, okay, Satoshi created Bitcoin, and he's got a lot, or they've got a lot, right? Whatever. But a couple years go by, and they're like, hey, this is an even better idea than I thought it was. I'm gonna buy more Bitcoin. There's nothing inherently wrong with that action.
yeah. And so I'm trying to think if there's any other like questions on like just the mechanics of things. So
okay,
yeah.
so here, let me do this. So I would definitely recommend to understand the full mechanics of like tracing the origin address, talking to Gunther. I'm happy to put you in touch with him. There's also someone else who I would recommend that you talk to at the same time. I don't know if you've seen the movie The Highest of Stakes, which
No.
was the newest. Okay. Gosh, really should see it. So I was gonna send you tickets. It was playing near you.
Yeah. And so it seems like, so I'm trying to like piece together what to sort of objectively call this thing. So it's a smart contract, but it's basically like there's a lot of analogies to businesses in the decentralized space, and I get that there's something else because they're automated, and businesses aren't automated, they're run by people. But let's just say it's clear a person or entity created HEX and is kind of running it, and it runs itself now.
It runs itself.
Yeah, but some person created it, and based on HEX running, then if it runs according to, I guess, plan, then funds go to the founder, which is kind of like
the founder. You're assuming that the origin address is the founder.
Yeah,
so funds go to the origin address is what you mean.
Yeah, it's either the founder or someone, a party designated by the founders.
Or an AI.
Yes, or an AI designated by the founders, but it's a founder designated address. And so that's kind of reminds me of, I guess, like the Zcash founders reward, where when Zcash was created, the initial investors who put money into Zcash's development, then, I mean, there's a lot more nuance to this, and I don't want to spend too much time on this because the people, no, that's not actually true. Okay, I don't want to spread misinformation, but basically the founders reward, 20% of the block reward went to primarily people who founded Zcash, and then that turned into the dev fund, which then became purely for running Zcash. But in the beginning, it was a little bit of like some of the money that got created went to the people that created this thing. Even though it was a decentralized, permissionless network, some of it went to the people who started the thing, or the people designated by the people who started the thing. If you want to be split hairs.
The like difference here, and this could change at some point in the future, is that none of the money that has gone to the origin address, none of the funds, none of the ETH or the HEX has ever been spent.
Not yet.
Not yet.
So there's a couple, and when was the last? I'm not sure if how common this knowledge is, but when was the last time anyone used funds from the origin address, meaning any action that would prove that they still have control, there is still an entity in control of those private keys?
It's been relatively recent because of the moving of liquidity.
Okay. Yeah.
So they definitely do still have access to those private keys.
Yeah. And so it is very possible that every single, and I mean, I'm not saying probable, by the way, I'm just saying possible, technically possible, that during this stream, the entirety of the funds in the origin address could be, removed from the address, could be sent and sold on the open market or whatever else. Technically, this is feasible, although
could happen
because it's an entity that is connected to HEX in some way, or at least whether they did it themselves or HEX connected them, against their will or whatever. It's still, by its actions, is clearly invested in the HEX ecosystem and would stand to, I guess, lose a lot to just crash the whole thing and just be done with it, right?
Sure, it's possible. And that's a huge criticism. That's even a criticism of mine. A lot of people came after me like, hey, you understand this smart contract. You understand this better than most people. And this is years ago, right? So like, why aren't you 100% in? I said, well, because at any time the origin address could take actions that drive this to zero. They say, well, the origin address has never done anything that didn't benefit stakers. And I said, yes, yet. But that doesn't mean, forever. And I definitely don't disagree with you there. However, that said, like with the SEC's charges looming, I can't foresee that happening because that would really give credence to their claim, right?
Yeah.
So
as of right now, the founder's address, the origin address part of this whole equation could be one could say that has only served for maintenance of the protocol. That so far any money that's gone out has gone back in or has provided liquidity or things like that. And so as far as now, has there been any ETH that's gone out, got bought into HEX, gone back in, and then got sold for exogenous ETH somewhere else? Like, has there been any, and this is, by the way, I have not done any forensics or read anything. I'm just taking your word for this as far as you know, right? But as far as there's ETH has left and come back, but a lot of it has gone in as kind of a circular pattern, right? It's gone to provide liquidity. It's gone to buy HEX, maybe stake it, but then after that HEX has then been sold or whatever, has the ETH gone right back into the address, or has there been any evidence of actual capital associated with the origin address leaving the entire ecosystem completely?
No.
There's not been any evidence of that so far.
No. Okay. And here's this is why I would love for you to talk to either Gunther or in the Highest of Stakes movie, there are two fraud investigators. There's two people who are, come from outside of, HEX. One is a fraud investigator, a traditional fraud investigator. And then the other one, his name is Lamont Black. He is Lamont Black, is that it? He is a crypto professor, and he actually created a board game, a HEX board game, to teach his students how HEX works. Now, he remains a skeptic, but he has a depth of understanding of what has gone on with the origin addresses funds. I would love to see you talk to really him and Gunther. And if that's something that you wanted, I could make that happen.
Yeah. So that's kind of like the way the system kind of works. So I'm kind of thinking because, like, for example, use something like THORChain. Say it's analogous to an exchange business, right? Where if anyone can provide liquidity and earn part of trading fees that the business makes. So people, it provides a service, people use it, fees are generated that go to the protocol that goes to liquidity providers and node operators, who anyone can do that, again, assuming the capital, right? And so, for example, there's a fork of THORChain called the Maya protocol that works very similar, except I'm a little bit more familiar with that tokenomics because I kind of looked into it more. There's a specific Maya token, which, for example, if a developer has that or something like that, it gets a small percentage of the fees that work. But either way, it's a system. It's basically a decentralized, systematized business. We could kind of call that.
The difference here would be that what I think you're explaining via THORChain and Amaya is that relies on people trading, and so there being trading fees to split, where the HEX smart contract does not rely on anything happening except for the locked annual inflation of 3.69%. So every year, HEX's supply increases by 3.69%. That inflation is just that's hard coded into the smart contract. It cannot be changed. That inflation is then distributed to stakers relative to their T-shares. So the actual inflation earned is higher than 3.69% in HEX terms because not 100% of HEX is staked.
Yeah. So there's a comment in the live chat of one correction. The ETH from the AA feature or the transform lobby goes to a flush address and not the origin. There's a separate one for it.
Okay.
Okay. And two, the first activity on the chain involving the origin address is the HEX deployer sending gas to the origin address. And so, yeah, just some extra little stuff on that. But
okay, appreciate those. Thank you.
So when we're trying to, this has been something that I've been coming to a lot. It's taken me like 10 years in the crypto space to start to try to like hone in on the value proposition of crypto. I know I've always known very conceptually, very strongly on the conceptual basis, but more on the very specific kind of thing. And also like, how does it work? How does it work out, I should say? Not how does it function, but how does it actually work out and flourish long term? And in this thing, like the biggest, most frustrating thing for people who are super like adoption focused and all that kind of stuff has always been the market price and what tokens go up and what tokens go down. And I've noticed, other than basically Bitcoin and Ethereum, almost every project, especially what I would consider personally to be good projects, like the best projects, tend to have this thing where they do go through a hype cycle and then just like a long slide to oblivion, kind of in terms of market price. And obviously that's a speculative thing, but so it's made me kind of try to start thinking of things in much more of like a business type term of literally and re-examine like what is value and why should it go up or why should it go down or things like that, right? And from like the purely utilitarian perspective, I guess it's just like a business of what value does it provide to people, and people pay for that value. And so this is something where, like, for example, this is something I've actually gotten into a lot with the nano folks, because the nano folks have stripped all explicit paying from the protocol. And so it's all free. It's not free. And when you actually talk to people who understand it, especially people in the nano community who understand it, it isn't free, it's feeless. There's a little bit of a difference that you have to still contribute work and things like that money tends to be like actual fees and money are a proxy for. But it's still like the only way it has value is if you give it value. And the only reason you would give it value is whether real or not, but as long as you perceive it enough, it is real, I guess. It provides value back to you. So I buy an axe because I want to chop wood to heat my house in the winter because I value that. I give value to whoever gives me the axe, and they give me the tool that does the thing I want. So, in all that, what is Hex's business model in that case?
Sure. Yeah. So did you know? Okay. So banking, right? Cryptocurrency was Bitcoin cryptocurrency was created to like replace our traditional banking system. The biggest product, the first product of our banking system would be checking and savings accounts, right? What's the second?
I don't know. I'm not super familiar with how the history of banking evolved, but
It's certificates of deposits or time deposits.
yeah. And what does that do?
So, certificate of deposit would be like my aunts and uncles used to give these to me when I was a kid for birthdays and Christmases and things. They would buy, a $25 bond or CD, and then in 15 years I could cash that out for $50.
So it appreciate over time.
It appreciates over time, and it appreciates over time because of inflation. So the difference would be, though, that let's say that I want to cash, let's say that they give this to me, they give me this bond when I'm 10, and it matures when I turn 20. But when I turn 15, I'm like, I need money to buy a car. So I can cash it out for half of what it's allegedly worth. I can cash it out for just $25 instead of $50. But what happens to the remaining $25 that it's worth? Where does that go? Does that go to other CD holders? No, it all goes back to the bank. So certificate of deposit is one way of looking at HEX. Another way of looking at it would be like virtual lending and borrowing. And that's what I think is the smartest way of using that smart contract. So like, let's say I buy 1,000,000 HEX. I'm using this number because it's a flat, easy number to function with, right? Okay. I buy 1,000,000 HEX at a penny a piece. I'm really bad at math. How much does that cost? Like $100?
Something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, we should just make the math easier, and rather like 1,000,000, 100. Let's say buy 100 HEX. I can deal with those numbers.
Okay. So I buy 100 HEX at 1 penny a piece, and so that's $1. Yes, I did that math correct.
Yeah, 100 pennies is $1. Yes.
100 pennies is $1. Okay. So I buy 100 HEX. So I want to save some of that money for 15 years from now. So I stake 50 of my HEX for 5,555 days, and I'm not going to touch it until then unless I'm willing to pay penalties. Okay? Then the price of HEX appreciates. It appreciates, and let's just theoretically say it goes to $1, right? It never went that high, but like just for the sake of easy math here, we're going to say it goes to $1. So my 50 cents and my 50 HEX is now worth $50. And the HEX that I have staked for 5,555 days is also worth $50, except for that it's also accumulated more because it's staked, but I can't touch any of that. So let's say present me is like, I want to borrow money from future me. So I'm going to go ahead and cash out this liquid HEX that I'm holding. Yeah. And instead of borrowing money from the bank or borrowing money from a friend or taking out a cash advance on a credit card, I'm borrowing money from myself.
Okay. So with the CD model, just purely going on the CD thing. So let's say I buy $25 worth, and then 10 years later it matures, goes to 50. Let's just give that very simple thing. So the bank is the business that offers this to me. And in this case, if 100% of the customers, let's just say they have 10 customers, it's a teeny tiny bank, 10 customers that buy these, all 10 of them will wait until maturity. They don't withdraw early. Does the bank make money in this situation? Because I'm like, let's just, play a little. I mean, I'm not sure if it's like play ignorant or actually be ignorant, but like on the actual bank CD model, like, does if everyone plays by the rules, then does the bank make money and then can continue offering this service with a 100% maturity rate, or does the business model rely on some people, I guess getting cold feet early and just taking it out early?
So the business model doesn't necessarily rely on people early end staking, but it does rely on not 100% of the tokens being staked. And that's one advantage of the origin address, because a vast majority of the origin address's holdings are not staked.
Before we go to HEX specifically, just in terms of CDs and banks and stuff, I assume that the bank's primary, I guess, way of making money is you give the capital to them, and they pay you back, with interest and stuff later. What I assume that they're doing is that they're then, what banks tend to do, right? They're lending that out to other people. They're charging interest on those loans.
Right, but actually they're not lending it out to other people. So when
CDs
you deposit
do not
money,
get lended out then.
No, so when people deposit their money in the bank, this is like a misnomer. They're not actually lending that money out. They're using that money to qualify for grants from the government and then using that money.
Yeah, well, that's kind of messed up. But I mean, from an original model of the way banks are supposed to work, the way they make money by...
Yeah, but who cares how the banks are supposed to work if it's not how they do work?
Yeah, well, I guess just the way the business model works is like there's opportunity cost of capital. If you could do things like start a business with that capital, but you don't. You give it to the bank instead, and they profit off of holding on to that capital during that time, and they pay you back what I'd assume to be not all of the money they made off of your money during that time.
Correct.
All the money minus their profit bit, right?
Correct. Plus, just look at this. Like you buy a bond, you buy a $50 bond for $25 in 10 years. In 10 years, is $50 worth the same amount that $25 was worth 10 years before?
Maybe. I mean,
usually not. I mean,
yeah, it depends on what inflation actually does, which is, of course, that's an extra monkey wrench because the bank doesn't control inflation. There's a central bank that controls inflation, and that kind of goes on. So the actual money that's put into HEX by people, now we're actually going back to HEX. The actual money that's put in there, it doesn't necessarily get lended out or anything like that. It just stays in there. So it
actually gets burned. So when you stake your HEX is burned, and you get T shares or B shares or M shares instead.
Yeah, and so what is the business model of the protocol? You give them capital, and they, for all intents and purposes, you burn it, but you get a certificate of it. But they hold on to the capital, roughly speaking, during that time. And how does the protocol benefit from your capital? What's the business model there?
I believe that it just shows the strength and the belief in the smart contract, which incentivizes more people to have, faith in the smart contract and in the model. I know that there are some elements here that I know that have not been discussed and can't be discussed. There's some things where
some forbidden functionality there.
No, not forbidden functionality. But you should know this, and I can't explain this in great detail because I don't know enough about it to speak confidently. But there are applications built on top of HEX that allow people to tokenize their stakes and then sell them as NFTs.
Interesting.
So let's say that I had a 15-year stake and I wanted, and some emergency came up, right? Like my mom's very sick and I need to spend a bunch of money and I have no way to access that funds. And if I early end stake it, because we're not even halfway there, I lose principal and all the interest. There is a way for you to tokenize that stake and then sell it to a third to a third party buyer.
Yeah. So I mean that's a lot of like that DeFi stuff where you know, remember in the DeFi boom, you'd like take a loan out and then leverage that and then leverage that like a few different ways. Just some stuff anyone can kind of do on top of that stuff. We let me just type something up real quick because I did have a live chat question that I'm kind of like, it's like on the agenda of things and might be a good thing to put in there. Ignoring. Yeah, one time I had some questions. One time's a good dude. I'm pretty sure he's also a HEX holder, and so he had a question. I'm gonna put it.
Happy to answer.
I'm gonna put it off for just a little because this is like part of this big question. So if I stake HEX for a long period of time, or a period of time, let's just say, and at the end of that, and the only reason I would do that is with some sort of expectation of having more at the end, right? And so I have more at the end. Where does that exactly come from? And I know
So you have more HEX at the end.
Yes.
You have the only guarantee that you will have at the end of your stake is that you will have more HEX. There's no guarantee that HEX will be worth more fiat, Bitcoin, whatever. Where does the HEX come from? That HEX comes from the locked 3.69% annual inflation that's paid to stakers and early end stake penalties that you may have been rewarded.
Yeah, and so basically you're paid through inflation or people, I would say, causing premature inflation or whatever by ending their stake. They pay a penalty, and then that goes partially to everyone and partially to the origin address. But either way, it's just creates more. It creates more than the schedule otherwise would have had, right?
Correct.
And so that's
then also that not 100% of the stake of the HEX that's in circulation is staked, so you're earning more than the 3.69.
Yeah, and so this is something that's been, because I really like this whole tokenomic discussion thing, because honestly, no one knows what the best system is. Like, for example, Nano, again, hit on Nano, has no inflation. It just never has. THORChain does, but for a certain period of time. But its fork, the Maya protocol, has none. Is fee only. Nano has no fees. And and then you have, like, obviously Bitcoin has trailing off to zero inflation. It's expected to go down and fees go up. Monero has mostly that, but it hit a tail emission where it has permanent inflation forever, but very little to where it just doesn't really matter too much economically on the whole. And then you have things like Ethereum that have after EIP 1559 or whatever it was, have burning mechanisms now, where if it gets it's infinite inflation, but if you get it used a lot, it could actually lose its supply over time and become more scarce. The ultrasound money meme and all that stuff. And so it's funny to hear like different, the thing with these things, it's always like who pays for what. And in a purely fee-based model, holders pay nothing, essentially. Again, there's a lot of semantics, right? But protocols, they pay nothing. Users, fee payers, pay everything. That's kind of how that works. In the Monero model is mostly that way, except holders pay a little bit. That's what inflation is. Holders pay a little bit. And when we're talking about like a burn mechanism, then obviously fee payers pay everything, but it's not just average holders receive the benefit of that if there's a burn mechanism. So that's where it's different. Like a miner of Monero, for example, gets paid to run the network. and through fees, and it gets in inflation. So they get paid by holders for, I guess, security of parking your money, but also get paid by people who actually send it around. In Ethereum, nodes get paid, people who use Ethereum get paid, but people who just don't do anything with Ethereum at all theoretically either pay or actually get paid. And it just, these interesting kind of dynamics are kind of like who pays for what kind of make it, are very interesting. So when you're talking about HEX's inflation, right? If you receive, so an inflation based model means holders of the token pay. Now, if you hold and stake or something, or whatever the analogous thing in whatever other system might be, you get paid. And if the stake is more than, if the staking rewards are more than what you pay in inflation, then you're actually making money. You're being paid.
So the people in HEX who get diluted over time are liquid holders.
It's so liquid holders.
Otherwise, if you're staked, you're keeping up with inflation.
Yeah. If you're,
and so the concept behind the origin address being largely unstaked is that the origin address's total holding is by far being the most diluted over time.
Yes. So it is being the most diluted over time. Now, so basically, just before we go into like the model of the user, before I go into the model of the actual business, as it were, the protocol, the user, you pay, meaning you give value if you hold the token but don't stake it. And if you do stake it, you get that value, essentially, the value from that stuff.
However, you lose the opportunity to take advantage of upward price swings if you're locked.
So you mean by selling, for example?
Right. So
realizing those gains.
Okay. Yeah. So there was this huge trend early in HEX. I was always opposed to this. If you're not 100% staked, you're not a real Hexican. And I was like, that is ridiculous, right? Because if you're 100% staked and HEX goes from a penny to 50 cents, what are you going to do? Nothing. There's nothing that you can do. But if you're, partly, liquid and partly staked, that is the ability to really take advantage of the smart contract's full potential, because now you have the opportunity to sell your liquid bags, and continue to earn.
Yeah. It's kind of an interesting setup / game here, because if you have, if you're staking, you're basically saying, I think that the price of HEX is probably going to do okay. And, or at least, at least not drop too much. And then over time,
make up for whatever it does drop.
Over time, I have more HEX. You're kind of like long HEX, let's just say. It's like you're opening a long. And if you just buy the token, if you don't care about the price of HEX going up or down at all, you just don't touch it at all, probably. But if you buy the token, now you're like, okay, I'm short or mid-term, let's say mid. I'm mid-HEX or whatever, where my value is I'm paying via dilution, but I'm betting that the price might go up at some point, and then I can sell it. And then I make money. And so it's basically it's basically a mechanism by which two different types of parties, or a person who can, there's two different speculative functions there. Someone betting on the price doing okay in the short term, but not in the long term. Or, and they could really think that the price of HEX is going to keep going up, but they could just be like, I really want a house in 5 years or a couple years, so I'm going to hold on to it. I think it's going up, but I don't want it to, although if you have a specific time frame, you would just stake it for that period of time. But if you just say, I want to have it ready in case I can buy a house at any time,
Well, and
then
you can also do
yeah,
staking ladders,
yeah.
like you can stake, yeah, you can also ladder your stakes. So yeah.
And so those people are, and so it's basically of those. There's the other element I'm going to talk about in a second, but otherwise it's those two parties kind of betting on or those two approaches, betting on which one's going to be the more profitable one, kind of again
Right,
almost
and there's
against each
no
other.
reason, and from my perspective and from I know a lot of people's perspective, there's no reason why you can't belong to both of these parties,
Yeah, you
right?
can
Like why you
hedge
can't,
your risks.
right, why
Although
you can't go.
although if you 50-50 hedge, kind of, it doesn't really make sense because then it makes more sense to just slightly hedge then if you
Yep,
rather than like 50-50 because then it just kind of cancels each other out. It's kind of
yep.
like having opening a long and a short for the same amount. It's just like, all right, you want to just, why are we doing this,
Well,
right?
see,
So,
this is why this board game that Lamont created, why I think you would like enjoy this so
yeah.
much. And it's unfortunately deleted from the movie. It is in the deleted scenes. I can ask and see if it's possible to share this with you. But it really teaches some amazing lessons about the different
Yeah.
things that can happen.
And so those two people kind of play off of each other, and one or another could do better than the other. It's just so one
Yep.
could say the value, I would say, and this should come as no shock for crypto because crypto is at this point, as an investment, I should say, crypto is highly speculative and you could win, you could lose. And so the specific value proposition of HEX here is the ability for, I guess, advanced speculation, as in advanced functionality to that speculation, where it's not like, well, is the Ethereum Foundation going to do this thing? Is the
Right.
Cosmos going to get their shit together in this way? Instead of all that, you're just like, look, it's going to do this. This is a game I can figure out. I can figure out, I'm going to play the game. I'm going to either, the price is going to pump and then I can sell, or I'm going to bet on this other side. It's like hands, like in a card game almost. You play this hand here, you play this hand here, and you could lose money. But that happens in crypto. You could make money, and that also happens in crypto. And so it's kind of like it's sort of like a game of, yeah, it reminds me a lot because one of my friends, actually a neighbor, decided to, he's kind of like independently successful, I guess, but he decided to get a job at a local like beachside casino as like a card dealer because he needed something to do during the day, but also because he loves the people watching, which is kind of funny. But so he's been explaining all these games because I knew like nothing about like the whole like casino or gambling world or whatever, or like how the games are meter and stuff. And it's been very fascinating. I find a lot of parallels in that, like, you get someone who comes in and says, like, I'm going to play blackjack. I'm going to go here. And at some point, someone else might lose. I might win. And there's a reason why, like, on the whole, with this industry, I guess the casino industry, for example, on the whole, the casinos make money over the people that have it. But that doesn't, I kind of come to the realization that people find utility in playing the game in that, or they find value, I should say, more specifically, because
Sure.
they like the chance of being able to do this, or they like the experience of doing this. And
Well, and
so,
then bear in mind that like
yes.
Richard, the creator or from who knows, right? Like of Hex was a major StarCraft player in his 20s. So like the gamification is very much an important part and was very built into Hex to the smart contract. It was designed to be a game and it is one.
Yeah. And so when you get to, so the origin address holdings obviously don't participate in the inflation rewards, and they also don't sell so far, so they don't get that either. But they do get half of the, I guess, the quitter's penalty, let's just call it, right?
Yes.
So when
Mm-hmm.
people say, I'm going to, like, they miscalculate, or, like, so for example, they get, I'm going to stake long term, I'm going to do all this stuff, and then they realize, oh, I was wrong. This is on an epic pump. I hear rumors of an SEC lawsuit around the corner, whatever it is. I'm staked too far into this. I made a
Uh-huh.
mistake. I'm going to cut my losses. I'm going to pay a wrong person fee,
Uh-huh.
and I'm going to go sell right now. And so I'm still up, but I'm not as up as if I had just had my stake for exactly that period of time, but I had no idea of knowing in the past. So
Right.
I pay that fee to get out, and then everyone else earns it, but the house, let's call them,
Yep.
the
Mm-hmm.
originator, the house makes some off of that.
Uh-huh.
So have we had any kind of an analysis of how much the house is made in these kinds of early cancellation fees versus how much they've lost by not staking over the exact same period of time?
Yeah, so the house actually does have some stakes. They're not large stakes, and they're but like they don't not exist, right? The
Okay.
house does have some stakes. I couldn't tell you exactly in what amounts and what durations and where they are, although you could view all of that information on hex.vision if you wanted to, or look at Gunther's analysis, or watch the movie, which explains it, or talk to Lamont, who also knows very well. But so let's say the house does have that as well. I am sure that there is also like a full breakdown of how much the house has won/lost. I don't know those numbers, and I can't pretend, like I don't want to pretend that I do, because
Yeah. And so do you know, but do you just generally know if the house has maybe had profit or had loss? I mean, I don't know if that's been analyzed because I don't know the numbers.
in terms of USD value, I would say almost certainly that the house has lost because of,
Well,
it not
yeah.
taking because of it not taking, profits when Hex hit 50 cents, right? So but from the original, yeah, I mean, I would say the house wins. The house always wins. Now, I will say
Yes.
this. This is not something that's like known. I'm not speaking for,
Yeah.
the origin address or the or Hex. I don't work for them. I don't speak for Richard or Kyle or anyone, right? But like there is some speculation that should the SEC case come down to a question of whether Hex is sufficiently decentralized, being one of the criteria that the SEC looks at in these crypto cases, right?
Yeah.
Um, that one
Or I should say
thing,
that the judge in the suit, because the SEC is saying is not. That's they've
right,
alleged that, and the judge would
right,
have to decide.
right. But so let's say that it comes down to this as the ruling. One thing that speculatively could be done is the origin address could just stake everything and then early end stake it. And I'm not saying that they will, but if the
Yeah.
origin address staked everything and then early end staked it, that would distribute half of what the origin address holds to stakers and allow the origin address to keep get half back. They could do that multiple times. Now, whether or not that will happen, I have no idea. I'm just like, I look at it from a mechanism of like, if that were the ruling and there were a way to get around it, could something be done? That could be done.
Yeah. So let me hit, because I see one time's already typing another super chat, so I might as well get to the ones that he did before. So
Okay.
first of all, he said, "Does ETH contribute? Does contribute ETH mean surrender it, or do they still own it?" That's a little old. I think they meant when you're buying, when you're contributing and getting hex during the original distribution part.
Right. Yeah.
In
So
which case, it
when
means
you
surrender it, I
it's
guess.
surrender. Yeah. It's
Okay.
essentially the same as like making a trade, just like it was called it was not called the sacrifice, it was called the converter contract. So you were converting your ETH into Hex.
Yeah, it's so the other thing, the other question he had right here, and there might be another one that pops up while we're doing this, but he says, "Is Hex theoretically sustainable long term? Can the price of Hex conceivably not eventually collapse? If everyone is expecting to withdraw more value than they entered with, then how and where is the extra value generated? Does this number of people entering Hex need to keep growing forever to sustain a steadily constant or growing price of Hex?"
So I would say that that's the case with any asset. For Bitcoin to continue to go up in price, more people need to buy it than sell it. More people need to put their dollars or whatever, value into it for it to continue to go up. So in that way, I would say it's not dissimilar from like Ethereum, Bitcoin, houses, anything else.
Yeah.
And that said, there is a discussion right now about Hex needing additional utility for it to continue to grow. And that's something that an influencer called Your Friend Sami and Lamont have been
I mean, he's
discussing
not my
quite a
friend. I
lot.
don't know him, but yeah.
Well, no, but
I'm just
his,
kidding. I'm making a joke.
yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So, and then he also mentioned just now, says future access to money is less valuable than immediate access to money, which is kind of what we were breaking down about the two different games people are playing, right? There's the
Right.
staking and the not staking thing. He says, so doesn't the Hex model reduce total value? I guess this is where it gets a little bit more economically nuanced, right? Because I guess it doesn't necessarily reduce total value of money in Hex, but if people keep putting money into Hex, that's people who are not doing other things with their money. So I guess it is I would say, I guess correct me if I'm wrong, but I would define it as the Hex model captures total value, or it draws total value into the system. And I guess you could say it reduces exogenous value, right? Because it's in Hex and not doing other stuff. But
Correct.
I
Yeah.
guess that's similar of other things. There at some point was a post I saw from what's his name? From Richard, where it says, let me put that up on screen, just a small, like I guess it's like a Telegram thing. It says the only way Hex gets USD value is through onboarding new users. If the origin gets 10% less Hex coins, but 40% more USD value, ain't that better? So, basically, it seems like it's kind of interesting, like the growth and investment model versus like different business models. So, for example, now I have to say, this does remind me a little bit of Bitcoin's present model, and
Yeah.
I'll throw some criticisms of that in a little bit. But like,
Hey, 1 second. Let me let my dog in. He's like
yeah, no
scratching. I'm
problem.
gonna be right back, but I'm still
Yes,
listening.
I'll
yeah.
mention the because I'm sure you've heard a bunch of times the Bitcoin model. So
Yeah.
Bitcoin in the original model, right? In the original model of Bitcoin, people paid money to use this digital cash, right? They paid money to send and receive this digital cash, and the fees were expected to go up over time. Not the fee per transaction necessarily, but the entire fee revenue, the customers of the Bitcoin business, the Bitcoin network. And so even if, let's say you pay 10 cents a transaction, at some point, if you only ever charge 10 cents per transaction, or maybe more if it's a super high congestion bit, but then in order to keep growing as a business, the price of Bitcoin under that original Satoshi's model, I should say, I'm not getting all BSV in here. I'm just talking about, the original idea of the peer-to-peer electronic cash system, the way it was structured, because whatever Bitcoin is today, that's not how it was structured to be. Basically, the price of Bitcoin could be flat for an eternity, but it would still be sustainable as long as people continue to use it, and more people continue to use it means it continues to grow, even if people don't speculate on its value. Now, Bitcoin's model changed at some point, oddly enough, through not changing, because like once the block size was put in place, the limit was put in place, it not changing from that made the model change in kind of an ironic sort of way. But now the only way Bitcoin remains sustainable is if the fee revenue doubles every 4 years, which is just not happening, right? Because people will only pay so much for a certain transaction. Or if the price doubles enough so that the reducing inflation is enough to still pay the miners to be secure. Because if the price of Bitcoin remains flat over the next 10 years, Bitcoin's security goes in the toilet. Just honestly does. And so I think that like Bitcoin's model relies on getting new people to buy into the system. It just does. There's no way getting around that. And people get very upset at that. But it's true, right? And everything has its own little business model. And so to a certain extent, the business model where on the whole HEX users profit, meaning they make money, is a similar kind of a proposition. Now, that doesn't mean that's the only value proposition, because if I play a game with 10 other people, some of us make some money, some of us lose money. On the whole, the amount of money that us 10 people goes down over time. That doesn't mean that it was useless because we had fun playing the game, and we valued the chance that maybe being a couple of those people that made like a 50-50 raffle, right? Mm-hmm. And so that doesn't mean, but as far as an investment, if on the whole it's a reasonable investment, that does rely, as Richard said, on more people putting money in over time. And so that's kind of like, basically, I think that pretty well summarizes the entirety of like how, I won't say the entire, I'm never going to say entirety, right? But of how HEX works and why you should use it. You should get HEX if you want to play in this game of this approach or that approach, or a mix of both, depending on what you do. So that's what it does. And so when people say, now we're talking about like the scam part, because that's always what I broke down transparently does not sound like a scam if you know what you're getting into, right? You're doing a thing.
Let's talk like, let's just use a non-cryptocurrency example for just okay, right? So before I got into cryptocurrency, I bought and sold clothing, and then I bought clothing from like clearance centers or wherever, and then sold it on Amazon or eBay. And if I found like a dress that I was like, oh my God, this dress is amazing, it's going to look so good on so many people, everyone's going to want this dress, and I can get it at like a 90% discount, but it's out of season right now. So I'm going to have to hold this dress for 9 months or a year or whatever, right? So I buy 100 of this dress in varying sizes and hold this dress and store these dresses for a year. Then 9 months or a year from now, what I'm betting is that more people are going to want to buy that dress than did 9 months or a year ago.
Yeah. And so, in terms of like a dress, the value of a dress is twofold, right? It's one, you need to wear something, otherwise you get thrown in jail. But two, you derive value from the way it looks, kind of thing, like when you're wearing it. And so if you pay money and don't get it back, I mean, I'm never getting the money back on this shirt ever. It's just not. But I'm happy because it's serving a purpose. I get to wear it on these podcasts and out in the world, and that's kind of thing. Now, I guess that's the utility for the utility then for like a HEX kind of situation is in the ability to play the game. The game itself is the utility, as it could be, and it could be the chance at doing really well in the game is the utility, right? And the chance is worth, the price of admission. And so a lot of people throw on, the thing is, crypto is such a new system that even though economics and incentives and stuff are absolutely not new, the way crypto is structured is new. And so people throw around, especially maximalists, increasingly, everything's a scam. And a lot of people say projects that they don't like are scams. Like they say ETH is a scam because of the giant ICO airdrop thingy. Now, for me, that makes it have a questionably decentralized start, or basically a not decentralized start, and that's a decentralization, something I value. And it could be a red flag, right? But it's not necessarily a scam if it's above board. And I've had people say, "Oh, you got scammed. See, you used this token, and look at the price. You got ripped off." And I'm like, "Well, I bought it or I didn't buy it, honestly, because I don't buy, but I get paid in it, and maybe I'll swap one for another sometimes. But I use it. I acquire the tokens to do a thing with it. And I guess my question is, first of all, did I do the thing with it? Did it do what it said it was going to do? And if the price dumps, who cares? It did, like, I'm not getting scammed. But if it fails to do, like, the part of the scam is twofold. I mean, you have to lose money and you have to be deceived. And that's the big thing where it comes, like, when I say, like, I do not think Bitcoin is a scam. I think a lot of Bitcoin promoters are very much scammers, though, because they're promising things dishonestly. They're saying it's going to go up forever. You don't know that. It's going to this. Oh, you don't know that. It's like it could, if you say it could go up, or you're saying because of its restricted inflation and all that kind of stuff versus the dollar, it has a much higher chance of performing well. That's a lot of nuance. That's not really dishonest at that point. And so I guess when people say Hex is a scam, according to everything we just laid out, if this podcast was anyone's intro to Hex, I don't think anyone choosing to buy it could reasonably say they got scammed. Do you think you'd agree?
The contract does exactly what the contract said that it would do.
Yes. No. So where people get dicey, and where I personally don't, I guess, like it so much, is when is some of the marketing language of, and again, we're talking. There's a couple different. We have to be very specific so that we don't, like, say the wrong thing.
Right.
The contract does not lie, right? Because code is law, right? Code is law. It's out there. If you look into the contract and see what it does, you know exactly what it does, and you're not going to, if you understand it, you're not getting scammed.
Yep.
So now, I don't know who runs whatever, but so I'm just going to put up this thing from an early Hex promotion, the one that says, Hex, the first high-interest Bitcoin certificate of deposit, or blockchain, I should say, certificate of deposit, free for Bitcoin holders. Yes, all that's true. But then it says, Hex is designed to increase in value faster than anything else in history. And so, I mean, yeah, in some ways, sure, probably. I don't know if we can, but also it's designed to, if you do other things, the opposite, possibly.
Sure. One thing to remember, I don't know where this advertisement came from. Do you happen to know?
No, I saw it. It's a screenshot of something that I saw. Although I do also have the actual, the current Hex website, which obviously is post SEC whatever. So clearly it's how it's supposed to be. So Hex mining, or it's not technically mining, but terminology, whatever, averages 38% returns a year. So, and that's the staking stuff, right?
And that 38% returns per year is not relative to USD value. That would be relative to the increase in Hex, and it assumes the average stake length, which is about 7 years.
Yeah. So it averages 38% a year, 3+ years. You mint your own rewards and stuff like that. Let me just scroll. Oh, here's the highest stakes thing. I haven't actually even seen the trailer. I will have to actually watch
You
that.
have to see it. Oh my gosh, Joel, I'm so upset that you didn't go see it. I was going to send you free tickets.
Yeah. So this is future of finance here. Hex is totally decentralized. You mint your own rewards. There are no middle benefits. And then it says it used to cost 57 cents. Now they're worth 79 cents. So clearly saying it's going to go up in value. Now, it's not worth $79, I should say. It's not worth $79. It's about half that today. One could equally say the opposite. It used to be, what was the Hex peak Do you remember what the peak price was?
Are we talking about the price per T share or the price per
I
the
guess
price
I guess
per
hex
unit?
token, because that's what it says here, is the used to cost 57 cents per 10,000 hex. Now it's worth 79, although it's like 30 something. I checked a few hours ago.
Okay,
So,
so yeah, I'm not exactly sure what number you're looking at. I know that the peak price of Hex was right about 50 cents a token, but when they say that the price only goes up, they're talking about the price of a T share and that price relative to Hex. So like a T share may cost less in dollars today than it did
yeah.
6 months ago, but it does not cost less in Hex.
Yeah. So this thing right here, for example, says 10,000 hex. I'm not sure if it doesn't specify T share, so I guess it's just hex. It used to cost 57 cents. Now those 10,000 are worth $79 or half that. So it's saying, it's literally quoting a historical fact, right? Or at least, I mean, now is relative to when this got put out there, which is not today. But it's clearly saying it goes up in USD value. Now, it also has gone significantly down from the top. That is not specifically mentioned. And I don't think you have to necessarily say, well, the price dumped. But I think if you say the price pumped, you should say that it dumped too.
So, but that said, there are multiple places on the Hex webpage that say cryptocurrencies are extremely volatile. It's normal. It's entirely normal for a price to for prices to increase or decrease by over 99% in value. That is explicitly on the website. That said, I do understand what you're saying.
Yes, it's being marketed. Hex is changing lives, it says here. Delayed gratification is the key to success in personal development investing, blah, blah, blah. Hex pays average of 38% APY on average. Hex share price went up 16,000 something per fold. Yeah, so, and then it shows these ads and stuff about all this stuff. So clearly, again, we're talking a decentralized smart contract, a deployed smart contract that does exactly what it says it does. And there's people running a website, which I don't know who runs the Hex website. I'd assume it probably has someone to do with whoever created it or is behind the origin address, but not necessarily. And also whoever controls the origin address created Hex, maybe, or created it, and then now has no control over it today. So it could be someone created something to run a certain way, and then that same person then decided to do weird things, but it doesn't impact the original code because the code is just out there, right?
Correct.
There's clearly that. Someone in the comments, by the way, said that that one before was a screenshot of the OG Hex website about being designed to go up. But I guess this is where we get this reminds me of the SEC hair splitting on like the library case, for example, and even the Ripple case. I would say the Ripple case is a better thing, where the judge ruled in that case that secondary sales of XRP are not securities offerings. And however, did say Ripple illegally sold securities, meaning XRP. And they're going after the founders over that. And so it's like the exact same asset is being said is not a security and absolutely is a security in the same decision because of the nuance. The nuance is they sold it as a security, and therefore, they clearly sold it to raise capital for a company. I guess presenting it as tied to the company. However, today the token is not that thing, and if it's sold by third-party exchanges, it isn't. So I would I think it might be fair to apply a similar type of thing to Hex, where
Right, except for that there is no Hex company.
Yes, well, I'm just saying about the website in particular.
Okay.
Where Hex is just it's an innovative game, right? That a kind of like I wouldn't even say like maybe slot machine's not the best way because slot machine just push a button, but in the way that it's like it's automated in that way that it runs. And so it offers the opportunity for people to play this game against each other. If the game is fun, I guess that's the utility, or people like to play it, people will keep on putting money in, and then everyone who was in earlier, on the whole, if you average out everything, tends to do well. Otherwise, the opposite. But in that game, some people will do better and other people will not do better. And the value they play is the opportunity to play that game. That's the value they derive from that. So that's pretty transparent. I guess that you could call it not a scam. Even the origin address and things like that is, I guess, the cost of whoever created the system. It's them taking the fee for putting this thing on. It's just like, okay, it's like
except that they have not actually taken the fees yet.
Yeah, well, they haven't realized them yet, but it goes to that address. And so as long as that's above board in the contract, so if you understand the contract and you're playing the game, you say, this didn't come out for free. Like, this thing didn't just come out of nowhere for free for this thing. Someone is getting paid, or some entity is getting money for providing this service to people. And as long as you understand that that's the risk, and they only get paid if you break the rules of the game, so to speak. It's like a break the rules fee. As long as you understand that, it's all above board. Now, whoever is behind the marketing, I would say currently, but definitely in the past as well, behind of the HEX website, I think that's probably not. That's like Bitcoin maximalists saying, you're going to be a millionaire if you just buy one Bitcoin today. Like, I don't think that's perfectly above board to say that. Those people saying that. That's my opinion. I don't know if you have anything to add
I think
on
a lot of the criticism of HEX has revolved around the marketing. So I think that is a fair criticism.
Yeah. All right. So do you feel, and I kind of mentioned a little bit before we started the show, I guess my goal is to get us on the same page, to get everyone on the same page, rather than a debate where people are yelling at each other. Do you feel like we're kind of on the same page, whether or not we personally agree on certain things?
Yeah, I mean, Joel, we always are able to get to the same place. Yeah, I do. I think so. I mean, I think that there's so much more that like we could totally get into
absolutely.
With pulse and pulsex and the sacrifices.
I don't know if it's showing on my shirt. I'm starting to sweat through it because the AC
I know.
So we're gonna have to wrap this up pretty soon.
This conversation in another day.
Yeah, for sure. I think before we wrap things up, let me just make sure I didn't miss any comments or anything. Yeah. So, is there anything you want to shill now? Let's shill-o'clock. Anything you're personally working on? Anything you'd like people to look into? I mean, maybe you should say watch The Highest of Stakes, because I know you've talked about it a couple times.
Yeah, so I would love for you to watch The Highest of Stakes. It is no longer showing at theaters in the United States, but it is at theaters in the UK this weekend, tomorrow and Sunday.
So did it just go through a run and then the run is over? Is that why it's not?
Yeah, so they did a first week run. The first week run completely sold out in the US. They decided to add a second week run. The second week run didn't do quite as well. UK really demanded screenings, so they added some screenings in the UK. The ultimate aim is to get this movie into streaming services. The reason that streaming services have not been enthusiastic about picking it up is because it's about crypto and nobody dies or goes to jail. And that's really what they're looking for right now. At least that's what I'm being told. So that's what I'm being told. So here is the call to action. If you want to see this movie and you're not in a place where you're able to go see it in a movie theater, would be use the Highest of Stakes hashtag across social media platforms like, hey, Hulu, hey, Netflix, hey, X.com. Why can't I stream hashtag the Highest of Stakes? And let people know that there's demand for it, because that's what it's going to take to get one of these services to license it. You can also pre-purchase a box set from the Highest of Stakes website if you want to see it that badly. That also has bonus features, which, by the way, I'm in the movie, but cut from. I'm cut from the movie, so
Well, now
I'm
I'm
in the
definitely
bonus
not getting
features.
box set if you're
I,
not in it.
I'm in the bonus
Mm.
features. There's that. I also write for Crypto Mag, which we've talked about multiple times. I do a column, an insider's guide or confessions of a crypto insider. That's the name of my column. And I write other articles for them as well. I also sell ad space for them. So if you like want an ad and like a advertorial, if you haven't read my writing, judge for yourself, but like I think I'm pretty good. So
Yeah, I think so.
so yeah. So if that's something you're interested in, get in touch with me. The best way to reach me is on Twitter at nerdgirl007, no vowels. It's the same across all social platforms, but like if you send me a message on Telegram, I get thousands of them every day. I'll probably miss
Yeah,
it.
I put that in. I put the handle in the live chats real quick. So, and it's cryptomag.finance, right? Is that the correct site?
That is.
Okay.
That's the site.
There's a
But it's
few.
actually a physical magazine. So,
Yes.
like, yeah. So, not everything that goes into the physical magazine goes on on the website. And then Crypto Weekly is the other publication, and that gets published every 2 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, sounds good. A lot of fun stuff you're working on. Thanks so much for being on.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a very good chat. I've thoroughly enjoyed. And at some point, like I hope a lot of people watch this because this is the kind of stuff I like to do. I like to really go, I would say, deep, not in like, well, this smart contract executes this and that, but like get deep into the, like boiling something down to something that I think people can feel like they understand. Because I do a lot with people who are interested in crypto but have no idea how it works. And a lot of people are into it and don't understand how it works. And I kind of like going through and asking all the questions, going to like, okay, this and that. And like most people, when they think about inflation models and things like that, don't actually think about what does that mean? Like who pays for what? Or like people don't think about value. Like you think, oh, of course you sell a coffee. It's like, but why would you pay for a coffee? It's because it provides you the value of it tastes good if you like that. It gives you some energy, or maybe you want to sit in a coffee shop and work and it provides a better productivity environment. You're paying for all that value you get. Stuff like that. I enjoy this stuff, but it's kind of nerdy. Like I don't know if people just want to know price go up or like, I hope this kind of stuff does well is all I'm saying because I have fun doing it.
There's this notion, right? Like a lot of people within the cryptocurrency Bitcoiner space just automatically have this negative idea about inflation. Like, oh, if it's inflationary, it's bad. But I think that the issue with our inflation in fiat is not that there's inflation, it's that there's uncapped inflation, right? Like
Yeah,
we
and
have
arbitrary
no control.
inflation too.
Yeah. So like when inflation is capped, it's not necessarily a bad thing. And that's something that probably a lot of people, don't think about.
Yeah, of
Haven't
course.
thought about it.
And also, a lot of people really think that like they don't like Ethereum today because Ethereum has uncapped inflation. Well, not uncapped, but it has permanent inflation of a certain level, except for other conditions. And it's like, oh, I don't like that. And like a lot of people don't realize, and just the last thing, because we could just go on for another hour and then I'll really sweat.
Oh, wait, we could get so into Ethereum right now, but yeah.
But just Bitcoin versus Monero, people's like some Bitcoin maxis are like, I don't like Monero because it has infinite inflation. Yeah, but also has significantly lower inflation than Bitcoin right now. And they're like, but it's not inflation because the price is going up. I'm like, well, you don't understand what you're talking about. So
yeah,
it's stimulating to me, I should say. All right, well, everyone, thanks for watching. Sorry for dragging you into another 2-hour podcast. I think it might have been almost that last week. So, well, you guys better like and subscribe and all this kind of stuff. So,
yes,
absolutely do that. Next week, I think I'm doing a Dash podcast in the morning on next Friday, and then the usual news show.
nice.
So the Dash one, I just scheduled it today, so it should be a deep dive into the technical things of dash evolution, which is, very, fingers crossed, very close to final mainnet release, and does stuff very differently than almost anything else in crypto from what I've heard. And as such, there's that whole like, well, what does it do differently? Well, why data contracts? What's GroveDB, this database it uses, and like all this. I thought it was digital cash. Like, why is it doing like a lot of that? Like, I feel like I have like a 75% answer to that question. I'm gonna try to get Paul from research, Paul DeLucia from research on that to get me up to 100%. So that'll be interesting. And then also Paul Pui is on the regular news show. Paul from Edge. There's Paul from research and Paul from Edge. It's a 2 Paul day next Friday.
Wow.
Different Pauls.
All right. Sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me on. I hope that I did an adequate job of answering people's questions and representing what the HEX smart contract is and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was great. I mean, I knew some about HEX. I knew more leading up to this, but I learned a significant amount there's a few extra things where I feel much better equipped to tell someone about it after this podcast. So all thanks to what you've said. So thanks very much for that. Like, comment, share, subscribe, everyone. I'm going to hit the end thing, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.